There are some people joining. So, hello everyone. I'm Kratika. First of all, I would like to introduce Anupama. So today, Anupama is going to just give you basic tips what you need to prepare for MA Linguistics from JNU. And if you have any doubts, you can ask her. So, Anupama, we can start.
Yeah, sure. Can you guys hear me?
I can't hear you.
You can hear me.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Anupama, your sound is little not clear, but yes, it's audible.
Okay. Should I increase my volume?
No, no, it's fine. If
Okay.
anyone else like,
Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello. Okay, cool. So I'll try presenting my screen. Please say if it's visible or not. Please say you if you type it, I can't see it. Okay. Is my screen visible?
Yes, ma'am. It's
Okay.
visible.
Can you guys see the PPT? Hello.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Hello.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. It's visible.
You are seeing the first screen, Introduction to Linguistics, right?
Yes, yes, ma'am. JNUE Preparatory Introduction Lecture.
Okay. Uh, is it in the correct alignment or should I shift it?
It's
You
correct, ma'am.
guys see it correctly. Okay, cool. So, good morning. I'm sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anupama. I'm just an MA student, just passed out from JNU. So, I don't tell you that this is the best lecture. This is it, everything. Nothing of those of that sort. If you guys know something much more, please share it with me as well. I won't say that I'm the best. That's it. Okay. What's language? If I ask you what is a language, how would you define it? It's just a means of communication. What do you communicate? You communicate your message, you communicate your emotions, you communicate your feelings to one person, to yourself, to someone else, to a group, to a larger section. It depends. You sometimes talk to yourself, your own feelings, your own emotions. Sometimes you talk to your friend. Sometimes you talk to a group. Say, I'm talking to a group. Sometimes you talk via a bigger channel, say mass communication, where you see a television presenter talking out. So these are all various types of communication. And what do we? Uh, it's language that we are using through which we can communicate. And how do we communicate this? Either we are communicating through voices, like I'm talking to a cell phone. I'm not talking to you while sitting you in front of me. I'm talking to a device. Likewise, I can call you and talk. Now what we are doing is a video conferencing. I can call you and talk. I can sit someone, if someone is sitting just side by side with me, I can talk to him via that channel. That channel is audio channel, where air being the medium. So there is a language is a mean of communication. We communicate to an individual, to a group, to a larger mass communicate, and we use different channels for communication. And there are quite definitions given by Sapir and many other people. You might just look into those definitions. Maybe the question could be a definition would be given about language, and you would be asked who said this definition. So there is no much like you have to thoroughly understand it or thoroughly by heart it, but you should know about a few people who have told about what is language, what is linguistics, etc. So I have quoted Sapir's definition: language is a purely human and non-intrinsic method of communicating ideas, emotions, and desires by means of a system of voluntarily produced symbols. You don't need to know the in-depth meaning. It basically says language is communicated by human via various symbols. Even the words we use, the diagrams we use, then the signs we see, they are all symbols. Then it's the next definition is by David Crystal. The discussion may be summarized by referring to language as human vocal noise used systematically and conventionally by a community for purpose of communication. According to Crystal, language is a vocal noise. Whatever we say or whatever we can hear, which is used systematically, and which is the use of language is for communication and nothing else. According to R.H. Hobbins, language is a form of communication by means of a system of symbols principally transmitted by vocal sounds. Everyone is talking about the same stuff. So I don't want you to I know the meaning of these, but just read through the definitions of languages so that if someone give you a definition and ask you who told this, you would be able to identify the person. I hope you guys are following. Hello? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, cool. Please, guys, respond. I can't see your chats. So if you chat it and message in the chat box, I won't be able to see it. So if I say hello, hi, please respond so that I don't feel like I'm talking to myself. Okay. Then, do you think that only human beings communicate? Don't you think animals also communicate? What do you say? Does animal communicate? Please give an yes or no. Hello,
Yes,
hello,
I think.
hello.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am, I
ma'am.
think.
Okay, thank you. Okay, animals do communicate. We have seen like news reports where when there is a tsunami, you will see, you would have read news reports where animals have run away from the sea areas to mountain areas. So the animals do communicate. So where is the difference? What is the difference between a human communication and animal communication? There it comes Charles F. Hockett. Yes. Hello. Did
Yes, ma'am, it's
someone speak?
audible.
Okay, cool. Okay. Charles F. Hockett has defined some design features to human language which help us to differentiate between a human language and an animal language. There are some 7 important features, but there are other features as well. I would give you all the features and later on tell you what are the most important that you will have to keep a note on. First is vocal auditory channel. Vocal auditory channel means I'm using my vocal cords to say something, and you are hearing it via your ears, which is a part of the auditory system of your of your body. So vocal cords plus the auditory system makes the vocal auditory channel. Broadcasting transmission and directional reception. What I am saying is spread out everywhere in the air, but when you hear it, you will feel that it is coming from one direction. Like if you are talking to your friend, if I'm say I'm talking to my friend, I would be saying something and it will be out to the whole air, but she would feel like I'm talking to her from one direction. So that is, there is a broadcast of transmission, but the receptor, whoever is hearing it, will feel it that it's directional. There is from one direction it is coming. Transitoriness or rapid fading. Like if I'm saying something, it will fade away in some minutes. You won't just echoing it and hear it for a number of times. Whatever I'm saying, it's just for this minute. The next minute, it's faded and went away. Interchangeability. If I'm talking to someone, let's say I'm talking, next I can give a break and you guys can talk. So it is interchangeability, one two-way communication. I'll talk, then you will hear, you will interrupt it, you will tell me something else, then we'll have a communication. It is two-way. Next is total feedback. For whatever I'm saying, I'll get a feedback. Say if I'm saying some bullshit, you won't just hear it and leave it. You will give me a feedback. You'll say, yes, I can. It's understandable. No, you're wrong. Or say, I didn't get you correctly. So these are all feedbacks. Sometimes it may not be just saying something. It would be like, say, I'm talking to you something and you didn't understand it rightly. Then you will say, huh? You won't presumably say a sentence, but just a word or just a facial expression would give me a feedback. So I get a feedback from the communication. Specialization means whatever I'm communicating has an intention. Here I'm talking not for nothing, but I'm talking for an intention that you should understand something. So every language, everything that we communicate has an intention, and it's not just a biological function. Semanticity means every sound that I produce has a certain meaning. Like I say yes, this sound has a meaning. If I say no, that sound has a meaning. So every sound that I'm producing or every sound that we produce has a certain meaning. Arbitrary means there is no one-to-one connection between a word and its meaning. This is easily understandable if you say there are quite a lot of languages around the world. Say I'm a speaker of Malayalam, and there are many other languages in India like Hindi, Urdu, Telugu, Kannada, many more, Khasi, Tulu, etc. Then there is English. So if I say in Hindi, you say for cat, you say Billy. And in English, it's cat. For a dog, it's Kutta. So in one language, one thing would name something, and in another language, it would be something else. So there is no one-to-one connection between a thing or an animal or anything per se and its meaning. Say, my name is Anupama. It doesn't have anything to do with my structure or anything. It's just because my parents have named me Anupama, my name is Anupama. If tomorrow I feel like Anupama is not suitable, I can name it something else and publish it that in the newspaper, say this from this day onwards, my name is not Anupama. I have named it, say, X. So all my certificates will have it X. In the similar way, I can say, I can call a cat with something else and say, yeah, for me, that cat is this. Why? And if a community goes on with the same, say that from this day onwards, for us, cat is Y, and they continue it, then after a certain generation, you will see that cat will have a new name, Y. So there is no one-to-one connection between the what we call a thing and its actual existence. Discreteness means whatever word I say or whatever sentence I say, I can break it down. If I say I'm taking a lecture, I can break it down as I am taking a lecture. Further down, I can break down this lecture letters LECTURE. So whatever we are saying, whatever we are communicating, we can again divide it into simpler. A sentence can be into phrases. Phrases can be divided into words. A word can be divided into a morpheme. A morpheme can be divided into a sound or phoneme. Next is displacement. Displacement means I can talk about anything. I can even talk about something in the space. So it's not very necessary that I should talk about something that's in my immediate surrounding. Say here I'm in Kerala. I can talk about something that's in North India, say Delhi. I can say today it rained in Delhi. Or I can say it might rain tomorrow in Delhi. Or then say something in America, like the weather should be good in America today. Or I can even talk about something in space. What if there is an volcano eruption in the moon? So displacement basically mean we can talk about anything using language, anywhere around the world, anything anywhere around the world, and everything around the world. Productivity means even using simple one word, two word, or three words, we can produce millions of sentences. I can go on talk to you for hours and hours, still talk to you for another hours and hours. I mean, just use three, four words and go on creating sentences and sentences. So language has productivity. It can produce sentences, words. I can even create new words if I want to and write it down or post it down and say that this word I have invented, this means this. Maybe someone else, maybe my friend or a family member may use that word, pick it up and use that word to produce a new sentence. So that's productivity. Cultural transmission means it's through language that we are giving our sharing our culture from one generation to another generation. The stories that we know, the traditions that we follow, the culture that we follow, they are all not just started from us. It has beginning for to our ancestor level. They transmitted to the next generation via language. Like when humans started were living in the caves, they didn't know words or letters. They gave messages via drawings. We can still see those drawings in the caves. So those drawings do have a message. They were trying to transmit it to the next generation. Duality of patterning means a phoneme will give rise to a morpheme. A morpheme will give rise to a word will give rise to a phrase will make a sentence, sentence might make a paragraph might make a bigger thing. So from a small sound, it start producing a bigger paragraph. It's just the opposite of discreteness. From how you can break down a whole sentence into smaller units to a sound, similarly, from a sound, you can form a sentence or a paragraph. Prevarication means using language, you can lie. I can lie using language. I can say, tell you a lie and make you believe in that. But we don't know whether animals would also lie. So prevarication is an ability to lie. Reflexiveness means I can talk about language itself. Likewise, what I'm doing now, I'm talking about language using language. Learnability, we can learn and teach language. We learn all the languages we know. Our mother tongue we learn from our mother or the surroundings we are in. The second language would be maybe from our school. The third language maybe from somewhere else we go for occupation. Similarly, we can learn any language and every language. So these are the features of human language. The important ones are vocal auditory channel, broadcast transmission and directional reception, transitoriness or rapid fading, interchangeability, total feedback, arbitrariness, discreteness, displacement, cultural transmission, reflexiveness, and learnability. You need not know all the features, but you should at least know these things that I have repeated. Hope you are following. Hello. Hello, hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So what's linguistics? Linguistics basically is the scientific study of language. If you ask me why is linguistics scientific, we have this, like how we study about chemistry or how we study about biology. We have a hypothesis and we research on it and then come to a conclusion. Sometimes the conclusion would match with a hypothesis, sometimes it may not. So linguistics is also a scientific study. Even though the one you are appearing for, it's MA linguistics, there are many universities that give you MSc in linguistics, or say BSc in linguistics, MSc in computational linguistics, MSc in neurolinguistics, MSc in psycholinguistics, etc. So linguistics is a scientific discipline, even though certain universities give it as an art stream. Then linguistics is broadly classified into microlinguistics and macrolinguistics. Microlinguistics is based on phonetics, phonology, morphology, semantics, syntax, pragmatics, discourse, etc. While macrolinguistics is on social linguistics, neurolinguistics, psycholinguistics, stylistics, discourse analysis, etc. You need not know the definition of everything, but there are certain definitions that you should know and know deep into certain sub branches. Like you should concentrate on social linguistics very much. A lot of questions come from social linguistics. That's very important that's very important in a entrance point of view. You might don't not even know that this is related to sociolinguistics. In microlinguistics, the most important is morphology, because there are 2-3 questions which are repeatedly asked, which is linked to morphology. For a definition per se, we can say phonetics is a study of speech sounds on an overall, while phonology is study of speech sounds in a language. Say, if I study about the speech sounds in English language, then that's phonology. If I'm studying about speech sounds of every language, then that's phonetics. Morphology is a study of morphemes, which is the most discrete unit which gives you a meaning. A sound may not always give you a meaning, but a morpheme will give you a meaning. Like if I say which is a sound, it can also give you a meaning, like I'm talking about me. But if I say sound like s, it doesn't give you a meaning, it's just a sound for you. But if I say something like shh, that's a meaning which may ask you to keep quiet. Shh. Semantics is the study of words and its meaning. Syntax is the study of sentences. Pragmatics is the study of context, how you use language varying to the context. Sociolinguistics is the study of language pertaining to the society. Neurolinguistics is basically the study of language connecting to your our biological brain and brain functions. Like you may know about certain language disorders because of which you cannot communicate in language. There are several aphasia, there are autistic issues, there are issues with deaf and dumb children. These all are connected with neurolinguistics and psycholinguistics. Stylistics is basically the the way you write something or the way you say something. There is a style for certain writers, there is style for certain other writers. I have a style for my own, you have a style for your own. Stylistics is how you make out from you read a poem, how would you interpret that poem. Discourse analysis on discourse, it's also context. So now a language could either be a spoken language, you speak, or someone can write it. So written language. You shouldn't have this thought that every language will have a written variety apart from its spoken. There are many languages who doesn't have a script. Like there is Dravidian language called Tulu, which doesn't have a script on its own. So it's not a written language. And if you have to write that language, some people use Malayalam script to write it, while some other use Kannada script to write it. Some use the linguists use the IPA, International Phonetic Alphabet, to write Tulu. So it doesn't have a script on its own. So every language won't have a written way, but it can be spoken. It can be there would be sounds associated with it. There would be words associated with it. Whatever we are saying, the speech is associated with the phoneme, the sound, while the written one is associated with the grapheme or letter. If I write a letter A, it's a grapheme. And if I'm saying that letter A, that's a phoneme, that's a sound. So if you're repeating it, if you're making it say through your vocal folds up to your mouth and pronouncing it, producing it, that's a sound. If you are just writing it down, it's a grapheme. Grapheme can be a sign, like you may have seen signboards, that's also a grapheme. There are languages like Chinese, Korean, where you have each graph to represent certain word or certain meaning. Like they have markings for house. You just draw that marking and it means house. I hope it's clear. Hello? Hello, hello.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Now to know more about graphemes and phonemes, let's take a example of English language. In English, we have 26 letters or 26 graphemes, while English have 44 sounds or phonemes. In this 26 graphemes, 5 are vowels, 21 are consonants. In the sound system, we have 44 sounds, in which 20 are vowels. In that 20 itself, 12 are monophthong and 8 are diphthongs. The difference between a monophthong and a diphthong is, a monophthong is a single sound, like A, while a diphthong is combination of two vowels, two monophthongs, like A, ow, I, etc. Where you glide, you start from one vowel and you glide into the next vowel. Then there are 24 consonants like P, B, T, D, K, G, etc. The branch of phonetics have three levels: articulatory phonetics, acoustic phonetics, and auditory phonetics. Articulatory phonetics is how you articulate the phonemes. Like I say A, O, P,
B. The way I articulate each sound will be different. The articulatory phonetics deals with this, how you articulate a phoneme. Acoustic phonetics deal with the channel through which the sound is moving so that it can reach the receptor. The channels can be different. Like I have said, if I'm talking to a friend who is sitting just beside me, the channel is air. If now the channel I'm using is waves, magnetic waves or signal waves are being used. Auditory phonetics is you hear the sound and there is a combination with your auditory channels, and then your brain will interrupt the message. The articulatory phonetics have, if you study about articulatory phonetics, there are different organs that help you in producing the speech sounds. The next things that I'm talking to you is not very important. I won't say you that you have to by heart it, but you can just read through it and leave it. Lips, you have an upper lip and a lower lip. You use these lips to produce certain sounds like p, b, m, etc. What you do is you bring down those lips together, open it. P, b, m. You held it both the lips together and open. Then there is teeth. What you do is either you will use your tip of the tongue to one of the teeth, like you will have a push from your tongue to your teeth. Tongue on its own doesn't produce any sound, but when tongue, like for example, when tongue and teeth would produce some sounds, tongue and your palate will produce some other sounds. So tongue on its own doesn't produce any sound like your lips, but tongue helps in producing many other sounds. Tongue plus alveolar ridge produce sounds like retroflexes like j, etc. Where alveolar ridge is the palate. Like if you open your mouth and touch your upper part of your mouth, there is a ridge. There is a hard palate, soft palate, and an uvula. The hard palate is the roof of the mouth. The soft palate is somewhere you go more inside, you will see a soft area. If you move your tongue from the teeth and slowly to backward, you'll see first teeth, then you will go to hard palate. Then when you slowly move upward inside, you will see the soft palate. Uvula is basically those rings that's there inside. You will see a soft muscles loosely hanging in your throat region. That's uvula. After uvula is glottis. If you have been studying, if you have studied in your plus 1, plus 2 or 10th about your epiglottis, which will help you in preventing the food entering inside your windpipe. So the epiglottis or the glottal area also help in producing certain sounds like ng, which are very common in mainly Dravidian languages. Then there are vocal cords or vocal folds. It's It's a vocal folds. Vocal folds flap to each other and produce the sounds. It is located in the larynx area, just above the trachea. It is a part of the glottis. Whatever I have said till now, you can just read it out. If you search in any online sites, you will know you just have to search for acoustic phonetics, or if you search for production of speech or speech sounds or organs involved in speech, you will see the positioning of these organs, how they produce. You can even watch live videos of how it's produced. So, morphology is the study of words, how words are formed. The term morphology was first coined by J.W.B. Goethe. It was in a biological context. There are two important questions here. So, in some entrance questions, they ask which is that sub branch of linguistics whose word have derived with a biological context. It's morphology. Or someone can say, or there are some other questions like who coined the who coined the word morphology in a biological context for the first time. Words are produced in different ways. We call it the ways of production of words. Affixation is one of the way we produce words. Here we will basically say what are the different types of affix. There are mainly 4 types of affixes. There is prefix, then there is suffix, then infix, and circumfix. Prefix is a morpheme that you see just before a word. Like if I'm saying polite and if I'm using I am, then the word becomes impolite. Here the I am is a prefix. If I say important, which is a word, and I'm using un, where you get a new word called unimportant, which gives a new meaning. Here un becomes a prefix. Similarly, suffix is that attachment of morphemes that you use after a word. Like I say sing, and I give a affix ing, it becomes singing. Here ing becomes a suffix. Or I say use, and I add a suffix as, it becomes uses. Or you can make quite a lot of prefixes, suffixes. You use it in your while you write things and all. What you are not very familiar with is an infix and a circumfix, because these word process doesn't actually occur in English a lot. You will see the examples in other languages rather than in English. What do you do in infixes? You add a morpheme inside a word. Like I have here given an example of he. In house, what do you add is iz and make it his house. Or if you add an ma, which is a morpheme in between a sophisticated, in between the word sophisticated, you become sophisticated. But these are not used in a general English. You see these things in colloquial usage only. You won't see an infix in general English. You would see an example only in, say, German or in other languages. Then it's circumfix. In circumfix, what you do is you add a prefix and a suffix at the same time. It's not that you add a prefix for first and then wait for the suffix to be added. You add it both at the same time, then it's a circumfix. Like you are making it a circle, circum. Here you can see the words like enlighten, embolden, where in enlighten, the first en is added as a prefix, then there is an en added as a suffix. Both these en are added at the same time. Then there is embolden, where MEM and EN both are added at the same time. The questions which you can expect from here is you might be given certain morphemes and you would be asked whether it's a prefix or a suffix. Like if someone gives you a set of morphemes like UN, IN, PRE, etc. And if you are asked whether it's a prefix or suffix, you will have to identify it. And you would similarly, there might be examples of S, ES, ED, EN, etc. And you would be asked to identify whether it's a prefix, whether it's a suffix, etc. How you can easily identify a prefix and a suffix easily is the dash. If the dash comes after a morpheme, then that's a prefix. And if the dash comes before a morpheme, then that's a suffix. That dash indicates that something is there to complete the meaning. Like UN dash means something is to be attached to it for a complete meaning. Dash S means something would precede this dash. So you have to see where the dash comes. If dash comes after the morpheme, then that's a prefix. If the dash comes before the morpheme, then that's a suffix. Then the other question could be related to circumfix, where you would be asked, how would an affix become a circumfix? Is it when first morpheme is added in front of a word and then morpheme is added after the word? Or say two morphemes are added simultaneously from the front and back side, etc. So you should know the definition of circumfix and you should know some examples of prefix and suffix. The next few things are about certain definitions. Like first is Lang and Parole. This concept of Lang and Parole was introduced by Ferdinand de Saussure. Lang is language as a whole. Like if I say about English as a whole, it's Lang. And if I'm saying about how I use English, that is Parole. If you are talking about a whole speech community, a whole community using a language, then I'm talking about a Lang. And if I'm talking about one person, say how you use your language or how I use just an individual utterances, then I'm talking about Parole. Then the next concept which is introduced by Ferdinando Saussure is sign. Sign can be a word, sign can be something denoting a diagram, sign can be something which is present in the physical world, etc. Sign is basically divided into two. There is a signifier and a signified. Signifier is the word or a diagram, the thing that which we can read. Signified is the meaning that is conveyed with that word or diagram. Say, I see a tree. That tree is a sign. That tree will have a written word, TREE. That's a signifier. The meaning that I get while reading TREE, that is the signified. I hope it's clear. Hello? Hello? Uh, hello?
Yes, it's clear.
Okay. Guys, if you don't understand anything, please ask me, or please say that you didn't get it so that I can clear and move on. Okay. Competence and performance is a concept given by Noam Chomsky. It is very much related to Lang and Parole. Competence is the knowledge of language, while performance is how you use this knowledge to produce sentences. Both competence and performance and Lang and Parole are one and the same. Like competence correspond to Lang and performance correspond to Parole. Like you have a competition. Competition is a whole. How do you perform in that competition? Similarly, competence is you know about the language. Like if you ask me about English, I know many things about English. I know many words in English. I know certain rules that is in English. Now it's how I use those rules and produce sentences. The rules I know and you know would be same, or the words I know and you know would be same, but the sentences that I produce or you produce would be different. Say in a class there are 50 students and one teacher is teaching to all the 50 students. The same language is being taught, the same rules are being taught, say the same words are being taught, but how you use those words to produce a sentence would be different. Some may use the correct word formation techniques, means correct sentence formation techniques, and say a correct sentence. For some, they may say an incorrect sentence. For some others, they say half sentences of phrases. So it depends upon individual level how you use language to produce sentences. That usage of language to produce sentences is the performance, and the knowledge of the language is competence. Synchronic and diachronic studies are introduced by Saussure, Ferdinand de Saussure. It's about how you study language. Say, if I have to study about English from its beginning, like old English to this modern English. So I will study from old English time to till this time. Then it's a period of time that I'm studying. That period of time corresponds to diachronic study. If I start from one period to next period, that's a diachronic study. Like if I start from say middle English till modern English, or from middle English to post-colonial English, or if I say the development of English in the Indian subcontinent, when I start from the pre-independence time till the post-independence time. So if you are studying about a period of time, then that's a diachronic study of language. For a synchronic study, you study at a certain point of time. Like if I'm studying about English language post corona, like I'm studying about how English language has evolved after corona or after this pandemic, then that's a period of time that I'm concentrating on. Or if I'm saying if I want to study about English language in the Shakespearean time, then that's a certain period that I'm concentrating on. That's called synchronic study. If you concentrate on a certain point of time, that's a synchronic. And if you are concentrating on a period of time, that's diachronic. When I was talking about affixes, I have told you how there are different techniques by which you produce new words. These techniques, for some of these techniques would be known to you, some would be new. Some of these are very important, while some others are very important, and you can neglect these. First technique is compounding, like you take two words and then combine it. Like say network. I'm using a word net and then work, combining it together and producing a word network. That word formation technique is called compounding. Like there are other examples like football. Food plus ball becomes football, or footpath. Food plus path becomes footpath. Blackboard, white chalk, etc. Derivation is you have a word, and over a period of time it will have some changes, and a new word would be formed which has a new meaning. Like say what can I say, the words like thou, you, you when you see the Shakespearean time, thou thou had some changes and it derived into a word you. So derivation is this formation where you have a word, that word might have evolved some changes to derive into a new word. Then there is conversion technique, where there is no derivation that is involved, but the same word will be used in a different parts of speech. Like there is a like say there was a verb, over a period of time that verb changed into a noun, or even though that word is used as a verb, still it has a meaning of noun after some point of time. It can be vice versa. There was a noun, over a period of time, that noun is now used as verb as well. Like for a sentences, if I'm using smoking, smoke, smoking is injurious to health. Here the smoking is noun, while I'm using don't, or please, no smoking. Here the smoking word is a verb. So in conversion, there won't be a change in the word, but the way you use the word, the parts of speech would be changed. Affixation techniques I have already introduced to you. There are prefix, there are suffix, there are infixation, there are circumfixation. Next technique is blending. Blending is when two words are there and you use a little bit of both the words, stick it together, and the new word is formed. Like you may have heard about brunch, which is a combination of breakfast plus lunch. Or you say hotel, motor plus hotel becomes motel. Blending is this nickname. Then there is clipping. Clipping means like there is the words like mathematics. We don't say it mathematics nowadays. We just say maths. What you do is you are cutting certain parts of the word and using just certain other parts. Like sometimes you call your professors prof or profs. What you are doing is you just use the first few letters or the first few part of the word and cut down the remaining. You all have heard about burger, but actually the first word means the actual word was hamburger, but at some point of time this ham got cut and it came into just burger. Like I don't remember me using the word mathematics. I always use maths. Then rifle was rifle gun, but we just use rifle. Acronym is there are words, a group of words for which you just the initial letters. Either you say the letters alone or you make it a combination and say it as a word of its own, like NTA, JNU, JE. Like NTA is National Testing Agency. You just use the first initials of each word and say just NTA. JNU is Jawaharlal Nehru University. Similarly, you just use the first initials of the word, combine it together. You either say just as the initials only, J and U, or you just say it as a new word on its own. Back formation is basically you have a verb, and from that verb, a new noun is formed. It is also a kind of derivation. For example, you see there is a verb, there is a noun beggar, and that from that beggar, when you come to a word beg, like from editor, it comes edit. Back formation is from now when from a noun a verb is formed. Then there are other techniques like borrowing. You borrow words from other languages. Like there are English is a language we have which have maximum of borrowed words. It have borrowings from almost all languages. Then coinage is where we invent a new instrument, or we when the scientists invent new techniques or new instruments, or there is we find a new plant, we discover a new plant or discover a new land, you need to name it. So you coinage a new word and give it a name. Reduplication is basically you repeat, like kit, cat, zigzag, where there would be a change of either one sound or two. There are certain word formation techniques which you have to concentrate on, like compounding, affixation, blending, clipping, acronym, and reduplication. The remaining you can just read it and leave it. So, what is grammar? Am I clear till now? And do you have some doubt? Hello? Hello?
Yes, ma'am, it's clear.
Okay. So, what is grammar? Every language have grammar, right? Is there any language that doesn't have a grammar? We study every language from grammar. When we are in childhood, or say in lower primary classes, when we write a sentence, sometimes our teacher would say the grammar is wrong. You shouldn't place the subject here. The subject is produced at the first, or the object is at the end, or object is in the middle. So if grammar is basically a set of rules which we always try to follow to come to a standard English, or sorry, standard language. There are two types of grammars. There are descriptive grammar and prescriptive grammar. It doesn't this descriptive and prescriptive is two notions to languages in some way. Prescriptive grammar is you have seen doctors prescribing medicines, right? They'll say, okay, you have these problems, you will have to eat this medicine at, say, in the morning, these medicine at night, you have to use these medicines before your food, these medicines after your food. He'll prescribe your do's and don'ts. Prescriptive grammar is the same. Your doctor your grammarians, your language professionals would prescribe certain rules you have to follow, you should follow in this language. In descriptive grammar, what the grammarians or the language analysts say that language is to be studied from people who are using that language. Like I'm not a native speaker of English. So if I speak English in certain way, say I start a sentence without a subject, and when I see a native speaker starting a language with a subject and tell him, no, you should not use it. You should use this way. This should not be used. What I'm doing is I'm telling him to do something. I'm prescribing him. If on the contrary, if I'm just hearing him speak his native language, which is English, and I'm listening to him, and then I'm understanding, okay, he is using language in this way. So these way are also possible. There I'm the technique I'm using is descriptive. I'm basically watching or hearing a native speaker using their language, and I'm trying to derive rules or trying to derive how to use language hearing them. This is the basic difference between descriptive and prescriptive grammar. Prescriptive grammar was basically introduced. You would be introduced to prescriptive grammar when you would be in your lower primary or your UP sections, where you will have to you will first the teacher would say these are the rules, then they will ask you to form sentences or correct sentences. But in after some point of time, you would your teachers themselves would tell you that if you want to learn a language, you should be in that environment. You should watch, you should read something that is written in that language, or watch films or watch series, so that you can have a you would be constantly in that environment and learn from them. If your professor or if your teacher is asking you to be in that environment and learning, then that's called descriptive. Instead, if your professor is giving you rules and asking you to follow those rules, then that's prescriptive. The next topic is there are some confusing words like homo words, and there is polysemy. There are basically three homo words that you have to make a note of. One is homophone, then there are homographs, then there are homonyms. Homonyms is a combination of both homophones and homographs. For homophones and homographs, if you see the second part of the words, phones and graph. Phone denotes sound. Graph denote the way you write the word, the diagram. So homophones would be, homo is same. So homophones would be same sound. Homographs would be same spelling or same letters. So examples of homophones are 8, 8, the past tense of eat, and EIGHT, 8, the number 8. The examples of homographs are band. You have the band with which you tie your hair or you put in your hand, and there are band like there are a band of instruments or a school band, etc. Then there are bark. Then there is bark. Your dog bark. Then the bark of trees. Bat, the cricket bat and the animal bat. So how you, the easy way to study is homophones, same sound. Phones is sound. So homophones are words with same sounds. Homographs is same spelling. Graph is spelling. So homographs is same spelling. Homonyms is a combination of both these. So if you are given examples combining both these, and if you are asked which type of homo word is this, you can just write homonyms. The questions that could be expected from homo words are, you might be given a set of words and you would be asked which type. You will be given homophones, homographs, polysemy, etc. And you would be asked to tick which the example denote to. Or you would be given given the definition of homophones or homographs, and then there are in the options you would be given a set of examples and asked to what are denote homophones, denote homographs from the given set of options. Next is polysemy. Polysemy is if a word have two meanings in two different contexts, then that is called polysemy. Like say news, the word news, News, news. If I say the news, that news fired him. Here, the news denote to certain organization which fired him. Then, if I say the news is at 8 p.m. Here, I mean that the news is at 8 p.m. Where I say certain news readings, news headlines, which is broadcasted at 8 p.m. On one context, it becomes an organization, and the other context, it becomes a headlines. So this is what polysemy means. It would be the same word, one and the same, but it might mean two different things when the context change. Till now, we have completed the microlinguistics. Next, the major part is about macrolinguistics, and the most important one in it is sociolinguistics. In sociolinguistics, first part is whether there is a standard language or not. Do we actually have a standard language? Sometimes when we are using a language, we say that the language that you use is a certain dialect from a certain region that is not standard. Standard is to some other region, some other socioeconomic class language. Say, we usually say that the English that we use is the Indian English. And there are other varieties like British English, American English, Chinese English, and even in Indian English itself, there are varieties like Hinglish, where it is the English spoken by the people whose first language is Hindi. The English that is used in my place is commonly denoted as Manglish, the combination of Malayalam and English. So we actually say that there is no the language you speak is a certain dialect, it's not standard. Even in Hindi, we say it's not standard, it's sometimes the Hindi is called Braj Bhasha, sometimes it's Awadhi, sometimes it's Haryanvi, sometimes it's Rajasthani. They're all part of Hindi, which we say it's dialect. First question is there a standard language? We should say that there is not any standard language. The so-called standard we say is not actually in use, but we see in written form. Like when we read an article, we would say this is standard. We don't actually use a standard English and talk, or you don't talk in a standard Hindi to someone. What we all talk is a dialectical variety. This dialect can be of different types, like a dialect can be regional, social, gender in its main terms. Regional means pertaining to certain region, like in Hindi itself, the Hindi that is being spoken in Rajasthan is the Rajasthani. Haryana is Haryanvi. Similarly, the language corresponding to certain region, the dialect corresponding to certain region is regional dialect. Certainly, similarly, when the social class differs, there is a different dialect. Like the language used by, say, different, working class and middle class or an upper class would be different. And language change can be seen in gender as well. The language used by male, female, or the language used by the other gender minorities like LGBTQ plus would be different. So dialect can be different in its own, pertaining to the region, the socio-economic class or social class, gender. Then there are dialect varieties depending upon individual. This is called idiolect. The language I speak is different from the language you speak, even though, say, me and my sibling, we are from the same region, we are from the same socioeconomic class, say we are from the same gender, I and she, same gender, female. Still, the language, the way I speak Malayalam or English and the way she speak Malayalam or English would be different. This difference is called idiolect. Idiolect is the individual way in which we use language. The next is register and jargon. Register is the way we use language in a particular context. Say, in a wedding and in a funeral. We don't use language in the same way. In wedding, we would be jovial, we would be laughing, we would be talking so jovial to our friends, to our family members, we would be laughing out loud, we will be cracking jokes. When the context changes to funeral, the way we talk would be different. We won't laugh when someone is dead. We would be very sad. Even though that person is not related to us, we won't go and laugh. We'll be sad for the demise of that soul. We would keep silence. We won't even the non-linguistic cues, like we might maintain silence. Even if I'm a chatterbox, I go on talking. If I'm going to a funeral, I'll keep myself shut. I would talk only if necessary, and even that necessary situation, I'll hush my voice and then talk. I'll be talking very slowly, hushing my voice. So the language that we use, depending upon the context, that's called register. Jargons are languages used by certain professionals. Like we all are moving to linguistics. We are all here to study about linguistics. So there are certain jargons related to linguistics, say phoneme, morpheme, sound, grapheme, etc. If you come to linguistics and if you see a letter A, someone write A, B, C, D, E, you won't say that it's alphabets. You would say that's a grapheme. And someone is producing A, if they are saying the sound A, E, O, you would say that's a monophthong. And I, O, that's diphthong. That's the jargons used by linguist. Similarly, there would be jargons used by other professionals like a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, depending upon his or her profession. The doctor may say complicated big terms for certain illness, and he won't use that term to tell us what is that illness. Like for cancer and all, there are some other terms depending upon which type of cancer, where it infected, for doctors. He won't say that term to us because we won't know. We are not professionals, we are not doctors. Similarly, if I'm talking to a non-linguist person, I won't say the term grapheme or phoneme or morpheme or sociolinguistics or genderlect or idiolect. I would say sound, or I would say letter, alphabets. So jargons are the words or phrases that's used by certain professionals. Then there are slang. Slang is the colloquial use of a language. Say it's a spoken way. We won't use slang for written. You won't use slang words in a written context. Slang is a colloquial way of using language. It's mainly used in a spoken purpose. There are many slang words that we might use when we are talking to our friends, but we won't use that word when we are talking to a teacher, professor, or a elder brother, elder sister. There are many curse words that we use in slangs, which we call our friends without meaning it. But when we can't call the same our professors, even though however we are angry at our professors, however we want to we won't agree with him, we won't use those slang words to call him. We would be respectful. We would use sir, professor, lecturer, etc. to address him, while we might call our friends using those slang. We won't even call his name in the entire lifetime, just use those words. So slang words are these words or language we use in a colloquial way to address our which we use in non-formal context with our close acquaintances. Euphemism there are certain words, certain phrases that are not good to use, or words which would hurt some people's emotionally. So in place of those words, we use some other words. These words are called euphemistic words. Like if I see someone whose leg is injured and he's a handicap, because of this, I know I can't call him as a handicap looking at his face. So what I would call is he's a differently abled person. Similarly, it's advised that you shouldn't call a housewife if your mother doesn't have a job per se, but looking after you without a job, which is not socially accepted job. It's said that you shouldn't call her a housewife. Instead, you can call her a homemaker. This homemaker is a euphemism. Then there are isogloss. Isogloss is related to the regional dialect. Like there is a unknown map or line which would distinguish between one dialect from one region to another region. Say if I'm walking in the north from Gujarat to from Gujarat, I'm traveling till Delhi. The language spoken in Gujarat is Gujarati. Then I slowly move towards Rajasthan. Then I reach. The language is Rajasthani. So in between this Gujarat and Rajasthan, there is a line which in some way would differentiate the people speaking Gujarati and Rajasthani. This line is called an isoglose. You shouldn't think that this line is actually there somewhere, but it's unknowingly there. You wouldn't see this line in a map, but you would clearly understand if you're talking to someone in the border. Then there are terms like language contact, language maintenance, language change, language planning, etc. Language contact is say I am living in a borderland between Kerala and Karnataka. If I'm staying in the border, I would interact with both Malayalis who speak Malayalam and Kannadigas who speak the Kannada language. So I'm living in a contact situation where two languages are merging. The same way I have talked to you about the case of Gujarati and Rajasthani. Language contact is two language coming to close acquaintance for some purpose. Here it's border. I'm living there, so I'm in a contact situation. If I'm going for some work or trade, I'm traveling from Kerala for work to Delhi. My primary language is Malayalam and I don't know Hindi. Say, I don't know Hindi. So I'm traveling from Kerala to Delhi for some work and I don't know Hindi. I just know English. So I land there and I can't be very sure that everyone who is living in Delhi would know English. There would be people who would know basics of English and Hindi. So I'm in a contact situation. I would have to study Hindi. I will learn slowly by slowly. My Hindi won't be that good, but it would be communicable. These situations are called language contact. In language contact, there is certain terms. First term is pidgin. Pidgin is a language that is raised between two individual, two group or two language speaking community when they come into contact for some market purpose. Say a group of Malayalam speaking community shift from Kerala to somewhere in the north for trade. So to communicate, none of them know Hindi or so none of them know Hindi. Some know English, or you can even say none of them know Hindi or English, and they are traveling to somewhere in North India. So they are basically going for a living. So they should know the language to communicate. What they would know, what they would do is, after living there for a few years, they would develop a language which will not be exactly Hindi nor Malayalam. So it's a mixture of both the language. This language is called Pidgin. Pidgin is a combination of two or more language when two or more communities come together for the purpose of trade. Creole is that Pidgin which becomes the first language of a community. Say these two people, like the language, the group who shifted from Kerala for work purpose to North India, they have developed a pidgin for their trade. After some generations, like 3 or 4 generations, this pidgin might become a language, a mother tongue for one generation. Then that pidgin is called Creole. I hope it's clear.
Yes,
Then
ma'am.
there is, hello? Huh? Okay. Then there is code switching and code mixing. Code switching is I'm talking to you in English, right? So at some point of time, if I'm starting to talk in Hindi, then that's called code switching. I'm going on talking in one language and I'm switching to some other language totally. Like I'm telling a full paragraph in English, and if I have to explain to you that paragraph in Hindi, this is called code switching. Code mixing happens when I speak in English, but I use certain Hindi terms in between, then that's code mixing. Like I'm mixing two languages. Code switching is I will talk in a language, and if I feel like I'm more comfortable in some other language, I would switch to that language. Code mixing is two or more languages be talked, would be spoken simultaneously, or I use certain words from one language. Like even in a normal conversation, if two people share the same mother tongue, they won't be speaking just in their mother tongue. Say if two people who speak in Hindi are in contact, they are talking. They won't be talking just in Hindi. They would be using some English terms in between, like cap or here or there. Like, you won't speak just the language alone. That situations are code mixing. You are mixing two languages. You would be using words from one language or the other language wherever you are comfortable. Code switching actually happen when you feel like the opposite person didn't get you well through. So you feel it's necessary to switch to some other language which is comfortable for him. Code switching you will use entire sentence, entire phrases, entire paragraph in some other language. While in code mixing, I can continue speaking in English even though I speak certain words in Hindi. Next is language maintenance and shift. Due to various reasons, a language community can shift to some other language community. Say, I'm residing in Mumbai, and my first language is Marathi. In Mumbai, you have a very high, say in Mumbai, there is a situation where there is a very good pressure of Hindi over Marathi due to the influence of high Hindi films, then politicians, or say the people, local people itself feel like Marathi is losing its influence. So slowly what people do is they would leave their primary language and shift to the more prominent language. This is called language shift. Language maintenance is where you try maintaining your first language even though the situation is very bad. Language change is the same. You change from one language to another due to various purpose, like in in if you see in North India, there is what you see is a very is a big dialect of Hindi, from Gujarati, Rajasthani, Awadhi, Maghei, Braj Bhasha. It's all dialect of Hindi. At certain point of time, what would happen is if a Maghei speaking community and a Haryanvi speaking community come together, they might not know both, they might not communicate well easily. So they would shift to Hindi for convenience. This is called language shift. Then there is language isolate. Language isolate is certain languages would be just isolating would be very dissimilar similar to the languages which are around them. Like if I am in Kerala, I have already told you my language is Malayalam, but if you look around Kerala, Tamil and Malayalam have certain similarities. Similarly, Malayalam and Telugu have certain similarities. Malayalam and Kannada have certain similarity. The same in North India, Haryanvi and Awadhi will have certain similarity. Awadhi and Braj Bhasha would have certain similarity. If there is a language, say X, and the language surrounding X have no similarity with X, then the language X is called an isolate language. The example of isolate languages are Korean, Basque, where it's the only language in the entire language family. There is no other languages in the family. It is isolated. Language death happens when people from that language family start shifting to another language for their convenience, and after generation that language come to an end and no longer exist, then we say that that language is dead. The example of language, the dead languages could be Cornish English. There are questions where you would be asked, is Sanskrit a dead language? Or given below are some examples of some sentences would be given, and one would be Sanskrit is a dead language, or and you are asked, correct, choose the wrong answer, incorrect sentences, etc. And if the question is whether Sanskrit is a dead language, then it's wrong. Sanskrit is not a dead language. Even though there are no people whose first language is Sanskrit nowadays, still it's being taught in many schools, in many KVs. Sanskrit is taught as a language. So it is still in existence, at least in written format, or at least somewhere people speak the language. Language death means that language ceases its existence. There is no community speaking this language, even in its first or second or third. Language revitalization happens when a language which is dead due to some influence or some people, it revitalize on its and start becoming prevalent. Say Hebrew. When Jews, Hebrew language were spoken by Jews. When Jews were murdered by the Nazi government and later on they had to shift to some other places, Hebrew language died slowly. But after 2000s, when Jews started coming back to their place, Israel, and started living, they revitalized the language and started using it. So, an example of a language revitalization is Hebrew. Then there are sign language and the deaf children. Sometimes there would be questions like, is sign language a language? Do they have words? Do they also have phonemes, morphemes? Do they also communicate? Yes, deaf children also communicate. They also have their language is called sign. They use their hands. They use their fingers to express their emotions, their feelings. So they are communicating. So sign language is also a type of language, and deaf children are also communicating. And in sign language also there are varieties. There are Indian signs language, then American sign language, and British sign language. So sign language is also a type of language. It also has its own features. And then it's parts of speech. Parts of speech is actually very big topic, and you will have to read your basic textbooks. Your plus two English textbooks or your 10th English textbooks will have details of parts of speech, even though it won't be in the same heading. Parts of speech is basically the noun, verb, adjective, adverb, then conjunction, interjunctions, etc. The main questions that would be asked from parts of speech is what is content word and functional word. Content words are the nouns, verbs, adverbs, adjectives which have a meaning on its own, while functional words are the articles, interjunctions, conjunctions, which don't actually have a meaning on its own, or which don't make any sense if we produce it on it on an individual level, but it will help the content word to fulfill its meaning. Say if I'm saying just shut, shut means closing, but I haven't fulfilled the actual meaning. If I say just shut to someone, he would be perplexed. He won't know what to be shut. Sometimes I might mean shut your mouth, or I would have meant shut the door. But I should complete this. If I have to complete that sentence, complete that meaning, I should make use of functional words which don't have a meaning on its own. If I just say to, on its own doesn't have any meaning. But if I say come to me, when I'm using the functional word to with a content word, it helps to fulfill the entire meaning of the sentence. So content words are mainly nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, which have its own meaning. And functional words are the other words like articles, interjunctions, conjunctions, which won't have a meaning on its own, but it's very necessary in a sentence to complete the meaning of a sentence. The next topics are general topics, which you have to make a note and study so that you get marks in your general areas and linguistics. First, you have to note the eighth schedule. In the eighth schedule, when did that eighth schedule come into act? How many languages are included in the eighth schedule? Which are languages were newly introduced to eighth schedule, etc. Next is language families in India. There are many language families in India, like there are Dravidian language family, Indo-Aryan language family, Burmese language family, etc. You have to make note of the language families in India and write down which all languages comes in that language family. Like in last year, it was asked Tulu belongs to which language family, and then the options were given like Indo-Aryan, Dravidian, etc. Tulu belongs to Dravidian language family. Similarly, questions would be asked, picking out some languages and asking which language family does it belong to. Then you have to know about the babbling stage of a child. Uh, that is the stage in which a child starts speaking, say one word, two word. It's in the babbling stage. The child start babbling in a coherent words, which have meaning, but it's not a correct word or usage. So you'll have to know from which year to which year is mainly babbling stage. What are the features of babbling stage? Then there is LAT, language acquisition device. It is the concept related to Noam Chomsky. So the questions could be, what is LAT? Uh, like write the full form of LAD, or LAD was a concept put in by whom, which linguist put in the concept of LAD, etc. Then you have to know questions like, what is the language, what are the language of law and administration in India. People might just write Hindi. It's actually English and Hindi. Then there are which is that language with the largest number of speakers in India? It's Indo-Aryan language family, because Indo-Aryan language family is the language family of different dialects of Hindi. So it mainly covers all the north region. So it is the largest language family in India with largest number of speakers. Then there would be questions like, from which script the majority of Indian languages were developed from. There would be confusing options like Sanskrit, Devanagari script, etc. The actual answer is Brahmi. Most of the script of in major languages in India were developed from the Brahmi script. Then you will have to identify languages. Like say I have given you, like if a language is given, and if you are asked to say from which language family it's belong to, you will have to pick out. And sometimes English, from which language family does English come from, or they may ask about Sanskrit. So you'll have to identify languages. Then you will have to learn about the classical languages. There are certain languages of India which are given the status of classical, like there are Kannada, Hindi, Sanskrit, Kannada, Malayalam, Tamil, and all. They all have Korea. They will have the classic. They are all the classical languages of India. So you should make a note of these classical languages, and you should know the year in which these languages were given the title of classical languages. So if a question is asked, write the first to last order in which the classical languages order in which these languages became classical. So for those questions, you should know the year. Then about critical period and critical period hypothesis. It's not very important, but you should know the term. Critical period and critical period hypothesis, basically, there is a timeline, there is a period of time in our biological growth or in our language growth, which we term as critical period. The critical period is mainly from the year of 1.5 to 10, 10 or 12 years, the period in which we learn languages. Our brain try to accumulate language and produce sentences and words from what we have heard from our surroundings. Even if a person is from a different language family, like you might see your younger siblings watching English cartoons, and they would start talking in English after some point of time, without you being telling them the correct usage or correct sentence structure. They would start talking to you in English, even better English than you who have gone to a school and started speaking English, or you who are exposed to college. These kids might speak better English. It is because they are in their critical period, and they are exposed to that environment of a language. So what happens if a child is not exposed to language? at least one in this critical period, the child lose its ability to speak or communicate or in the language. You would have heard about the story of Genie if you type it, or wolf children, where the child was abandoned in the forest, and later on the wolf started looking after the children. And wolves don't use human languages, they have animal communication system, so the child won't know the human language in its critical period. So he won't use speech sounds for communication, but instead would use animal means of communication. So even after, so if that child comes back to a human territory after 15 years, what would happen is that child won't be able to communicate in any language, even though we give all the exposure and give him teachers and start teaching him from the basics. He won't be able to cope up. It's because the critical period has been passed. Then you might have the questions, okay, what about people who shift from one language environment to another language environment for some job purpose, and they still learn the language to which the language, the new language? It's because they already know a language. It's not that they don't know any language and they are shifting. They already know a first language, their mother tongue, and from there they are shifting to a new environment. If you already know a language, then what happens is you start comparing, contrasting, and learning. Like if I don't know Hindi and I know just Malayalam and English, and I'm shifting to a Hindi speaking community, I will start picking up Hindi. What I would do is I'll no, okay, if I for him the term I would correspond to this term in Hindi, the term cat would correspond to this term in Hindi, this to this. I'll start comparing and knowing, and I'll start learning it, the new language. If you don't have a language from the beginning, then how would you compare? How would you start learning uh, if it's past critical period? That's all I have to say. I'm sorry I have taken a lot of time. I won't say that I have done a very good job, wonderful job, but I have tried inculcating most of the stuff, I hope. If I have left some topics or you want to know about some topics, please reach out to me. I'll help you in getting into it. I would say linguistics is a very easy subject, and the entrance type questions would be very easy. They won't complicate things, or they won't ask you very complicated definitions, or you don't need to mug up things, a lot of things, and appear. The questions would be very simple. You will have to know basic concepts. If you have to read, if you feel like you want to read some extra textbooks, or if you feel like you are not satisfied, you have to know more and all, you can read then UGC NET linguistics paper. It is more than enough. If you start reading it, it would be beneficial for your NET exam as well. And it has topics divided into phonetics, phonology, semantics, sociolinguistics, neurolinguistics, psycholinguistics, which go deep. If you read some other textbooks, what would happen? Some introduction textbooks like for would be 700 pages, 800 pages. It would consume time. If you have time and if you are ready in reading, then it's totally okay. but I won't say it's not that necessary to go into deep for a linguistics entrance, MA entrance examination. And you can listen to lecture videos, introduction to linguistics lecture videos. There would be videos in your regional language. You can listen to them and start preparing. There are mock tests in NTA website. There are mock tests for JNU entrance examination. You can appear for those most mock test. And if there are other topics that I should cover, please let me know, or let Kritika know, so that I can take a note and help you out. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Anupama. It was really a great class. And if anyone of you has any doubts, you can directly reach out to Anupama, or you can drop your queries in group also. So thank you so much for joining the class, and let us know if you need any other class on any specific topic. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you so much, Anupama, once again. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Ma'am, where will we get the PDF?